Hi, folks, and welcome to another Raw and Real conversation. This evening, we will be discussing the Glastonbury, if I pronounce it correctly, the Glastonbury Festival. And like the subject may suggest, we won't be talking about music, but what stands out from the event itself, which was hate and anti-Semitism. This wave came from the usual suspects, the Irish band Niqab, and another talented band that I never heard of, and now it's all over the place, called Bob Villain. We'll also touch base on the pernicious effects of the woke rap in arts and civilization as such. And for that purpose, I have the pleasure of having with me the British author Garry Powell and the political analyst Raphael Castro Martinez, along with my co-host Marco Alexander. So if this is something that you are into, stay around for the next 90 minutes or so. If you know someone who is interested in this sort of chat, make sure to share. And if you have not subscribed, it would be great if you can do so by clicking that subscribe button below. I also want to mention that this episode is sponsored by Travel Device, and you can all avail from a special discount using the code on the video description when contacting the team, either by phone or by email. So I hope you enjoyed the session. Let's make sure this is interactive. Use the chat box, ask questions, make comments, and we'll make it this as dynamic as possible. Just before we jump into this discussion, I would like to greet Marco and ask you, how is the situation in Jerusalem after the last wave of missiles coming from the Houthis?
Well, the situation is relatively calm. There hasn't been too much action since the beginning of the ceasefire. Last night, the siren sounded. We had a little ballistic missile from the Houthis. They were getting a little bored. So, but that's about the totality of it. So things are generally quiet. Of course, they're not really quiet because the IDF is operating in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria. It has to take care of many years of neglect, but anyway, they're doing a good job.
All right, thanks, Marco. So let's jump into the festival itself, and I will start with Garry. So I would like to share that it seems that these music festivals are no longer about, this peace and love, like the hippies claimed in the 60s. So I would like to ask you, what do you think that happened to the left? Like, why do they adhere to hate and bitterness?
Well, that's an enormous question. You have to go back a long way. I think it's partly because they know they're losing now. Actually, I think they feel instinctively that public opinion has turned against them in many places. I think in England, for example, most people are not necessarily politically conservative. I mean, they voted in a socialist government last year, but they're socially conservative. And they don't really follow the woke agenda, which is, let's be honest, it's basically a Marxist agenda. And I think, there are lots and lots of factors. I think one of the big factors is that Trump's victory in the United States showed that progressivism, or the social justice movement, the wokeism, whatever you want to call it, was, if not defeated, at least on the retreat. And so I think a lot of people on the left have become very aggressive in response. And there are lots of other factors, as you know, too. social media too has tended to increase the polarization. I mean, there are people on the right who foment the aggression as well. The fault is not entirely on the left, though I think it's more the fault of the left at the moment.
Yeah. You know, I also think, I mean, you pointed it out. I'd like to add that, you know, until the 80s, the left thought it could offer an alternative. Since the collapse of the Berlin Wall, you know, it has absolutely nothing constructive to offer. It can only offer criticism of, you know, capitalism and, you know, bourgeois democracy. So it's basically turned into systematically and exclusively critical and more destructive. And I think that, you know, recent developments, especially artificial intelligence, has really made a lot of them terrified, because a lot of professors, a lot of artists are realizing that, you know, in the next 5 or 10 years, they'll be completely redundant. And this just increases their angst and their hatred against everything that we have achieved in the West.
Yeah, I basically agree with that. I would say that, you know, critical race theory, this whole critical theory panoply of post-colonialism and race theory and so on, identity politics, that's their response, really. I mean, they would claim that they are offering something else, and they would say that what they're offering is a sort of humanistic alternative that offers dignity and equality to everyone in the world, and that, let's face it, largely blames everything on the West, particularly on white men.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the reason is actually that, you know, there are still so many problems in Africa and other decolonized countries, especially in the Arab world. So, you know, instead of looking at the facts and saying what we have in Africa, what we have in the Arab world after these countries gained independence, is very similar to the dynamics described in George Orwell's Animal Farm. No, they keep on blaming, you know, what white men did 100 years ago. If the Arab world were prospering, you know, the whole industry would be completely irrelevant. And no one does post-colonial theory on, you know, successful countries that gained independence, like Malaysia, like Taiwan, because they obviously don't fit in with the entire thrust of the discipline.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So it seems that the hate and sorry, you want to
go ahead. I was going to make a tangential point.
Yeah. So it seems that the hate and the bitterness were not happening exclusively on the stage. The crowds, the spectators, they're also chanting hate and bitterness, and most of them are young. They will be the leaders of the future. Do you think it's something for us to be concerned? Or it's just what I called rage related to their age?
No, I don't think it's rage related to their age. They're not all young, actually. I think the average age of people attending these festivals is around 40 or 50. I mean, I suppose that's young compared to me, but they're not really callow youths, you know. I mean, I think we should certainly be concerned. I mean, the people responsible are the educated middle class, really. The educated middle class who are running the educational system. They're running the media by and large. They're running charities, NGOs. I mean, they're basically running the culture, in fact. So yeah, there's every reason to be concerned about the aggression when someone's shouting. I mean, let's get to specifics. You know, Bob Villan was shouting, "Kill the IDF." Now that's not technically illegal, because the IDF is a foreign army, and I mean he has the right not to like a foreign army, But I think the subtext, because we all know that the IDF is you have conscription in Israel, and if I'm correct, I think almost everybody serves. So I think the subtext is kill the Jews, and he was clever enough not to say that, because if it said kill the Jews, I think he would have got in trouble. But I don't think he's going to be prosecuted for this. But my feeling is that everyone understood that the subtext really was kill the Jews. And, you know, he told that story about his Jewish boss, where again, he was clever. I can't remember the words, and I'm not sure if you have the clip, but I don't think he specifically said that his boss was Jewish, but it was very clear from the context that he was. And he called his boss, you know, really disgusting names, which I won't repeat here. It was very, very clear anti-Semitism, actually. And I think it is, to me, it's truly shocking that he was applauded. And if you look at the footage of the audience, they're showing approval in a kind of aggressive way. They actually look as if they want to be violent, as if they want to hurt people, you know.
There's a kind of release, isn't there, Craig?
Yeah.
A kind of release that at last we can say what we want to say, express what we feel. That is the that's the impression I'm getting. Yeah.
Just an idea that came to my mind now. Can we say that among men, especially among young men who haven't exercised their masculinity, they saw an opportunity provided by Bob, inciting violence, inciting aggressiveness? Maybe they just find a reason to be masculine, you know, which is stupid, but it is what it is.
I think another factor is at play, you know, the juxtaposition, you know, of the suffering in Gaza with, you know, this Nazi description of the Jewish boss, you know, gives these people who are bitter and resentful the feeling that they're doing something humanitarian and brave when they applaud such bigotry. So, you know, it's not like the Nazis who said, oh, you know, let's kill the rich Jews. It's like, oh, let's hate the successful Jews, because by doing so, we're helping the poor people in Gaza who are so innocently suffering, and we're doing a humanitarian deed by hating these Jews who are successful.
Yeah, I'm going to show the clip if you don't mind, because I think there are some viewers here who are not really aware of what's happening, or maybe they have a biased view. So I'd rather show it again, just 30 seconds, okay?
Yeah.
So I'm going to make sure.
Death to the IDF! Free, free! Free, free! Free, free! Alright, but have you heard this one though? Death to the IDF! 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 Hell yeah, from the river to the sea, Palestine.
So to me, it seems more than a festival. It seems almost like a political event. Like if someone will tell me this is a Palestinian gathering and they are ready to go after synagogues and burn temples and, you know, destroy shops, I wouldn't be surprised. Like this, it seems like the beginning of a violent act. So if they would leave and start to be nasty with the Jewish communities, I wouldn't be surprised, because I think there is an actual incitement. That's my views. I would like you guys to comment.
No, I agree.
You know, I think that Bob Dylan is clearly an idiot, and you know, when you listen to that, it echoes very much like the mantras at the Nuremberg rallies. But what I think is really criminal is that the BBC broadcast that and brought that to millions of homes all over the world, because that was what really turned the words of an idiot into an international danger.
Yeah, quite agree. And to make it even worse, the Director General of the BBC, Tim Davie, who I'm ashamed to say went to my Cambridge college, he was actually there. So he could have pulled that at any moment, and he deliberately allowed that to play. Now, I'm not saying that he's anti-Semitic. I don't know enough about him, but I think he knows that the BBC's base, if you like, is left-wing and would approve of it. And it would, at the very least, it was a cowardly act, leaving that to live stream.
No, I mean, sorry, I think you're being too kind for him. I know you're supportive of your fellow college students, but what he did was basically, you know, like what people in Europe turned around and look what was happening, even they could stop it. So there's no forgiving this. You know, if I were a British Jewish leader, I would call all British Jews to stop paying the BBC tax, because you cannot pay a tax that supports, you know, public groups calls to murder your people. I'm surprised the British Jewish leadership hasn't done so already.
I quite agree. Yeah.
Marco, you are based in Jerusalem. How was it perceived in the capital of Israel?
I can't really say people are shocked, because by now we're quite used to this. The floodgates have been opened, so I don't think people are shocked anymore. It's what we've come to expect, because we see it all over Europe. Now, that's not to say that it's the majority of European or British people. I think British people are a decent lot, basically speaking. So I think there is a disconnect between what the media and cultural elites are up to and the man on the street.
Yeah.
And I think that is the problem, and it raises a question. You know, we speak very often about free speech and human rights. At what point do they exhaust themselves, in the sense they're in tension also with the rights, social rights, as it were? Does society have the right to invoke certain measures against individuals who are stepping out of line to such an extent and who are undermining the social fabric of a country? This is a question that I think is worth raising. Somebody like that, or like these individuals who are so at odds with public morality in Britain, which I believe still exists, does the community, does society have the right to reevaluate its relationship with certain people? Because I think, you know, we speak about human rights all the time, but we very rarely speak about the rights of society to recalibrate their relationship with certain individuals or groups within society.
Yeah, I mean, my view, I'm close to a free speech absolutist. I really do believe that we have to have the right to offend people.
No, I'm sorry. I'm not even saying that one shouldn't have the right, but perhaps it should be counterbalanced by the fact that society can, in some way, recalibrate its relations with individuals who undermine the very nature of society. You can say what you want. What I'm saying is, you say what you want, Mr. Bob Villain, but at the end of the day, there are consequences as well.
There are, but the point I was coming to is that for me, if someone says something very offensive to me, for example, say somebody says, you know, I hate all English people. I think all English people are, you know, vile exploiters or you know, who are responsible for all the colonialism and slavery and everything. I mean, I think they have the right to say that. I think they're wrong, but I want people to have that right. What I don't think they have the right to incite violence. When people are shouting death for a certain group, you know, to me, that's really crossing a line, because when someone's inciting violence, particularly in a big group setting like that, where we know from the psychology of crowds that a kind of hysterical reaction can occur, and people actually do tend to all start behaving in the same way, then I think that there's a definite line crossed, and people have to be stopped. But you know, for me, the other issue is that we have already in Britain a very strict policy on free speech for certain people. I mean, you probably know the case of Lucy Connolly.
Indeed, I do. Indeed, I do. Indeed, I do. But I think that's where it's gone. Lucy Connolly. I'm familiar with that case, and I think, of course, there's been a miscarriage of justice here, and there's been an abuse of government power. I'm thinking of different examples, because Britain is almost in a wartime situation. Israel has been in a wartime situation for 80 years. Now, let's put it this way. During World War II, certain people were isolated, and I think rightly so. People who held certain views were even incarcerated. We have the examples of Oswald Mosley and Nazi sympathizers, and I think that's perfectly justified. So I think there is a point where liberal democracies are short-circuiting. And for example, let's have a little thought experiment in Israel. So if I were to invoke freedom of speech here, or freedom of expression, as it were, and I think, by the way, it is abused here. Let's say, what about a man walking around in a Nazi uniform with swastikas in the middle of Ben Yehuda Street in Jerusalem? I think it tests the notion of free speech and our understanding of free speech, because I don't believe free speech hinges on that in the sense of license. I think there's a very important distinction to be made with freedom of speech and license, where you break certain rules. I don't know whether I've highlighted the point sufficiently, but anyway, I'm just trying to test certain ideas.
I'd like to add something, that basically the laws on free speech we had were for a pre-internet, pre-social media world. So in the old days, if someone said something, inciting or hateful, it stayed, between the little circle of friends. Now it can reach without any problem tens of thousands, millions of people instantly. So, the absolute right to free speech, which was relatively harmless 50 years ago, is no longer so. And, secondly, what we're seeing in England and in the whole of Western Union is, in the name of, respecting and, protecting social peace, the same dynamics that already exist in the Middle East or even in India, where you can absolutely not, criticize religion, because everyone knows what happens when you criticize certain religions. And that's why we see this, very heavy-handed punishment of all sorts of things or language that is offensive only to one specific group. I'd like to point out, that the British man who threw a ham sandwich at a mosque, he was instantly arrested and was killed while in jail. If he had thrown, a broken crucifix at a church, I very much doubt that he would even been interrogated by the police.
Right.
So we're seeing in England, just as in other countries of Western Europe, a Lebanonization of life, where, in order to pacify certain minorities, we're curbing our speech, we're losing our freedoms. And at the end of the day, we're going to start also, I think, having, quotas for different positions, so that no minority feels that it's not getting, what it's entitled by divine decree.
Right. But in a way, you're sort of, what I'm saying is, that is sort of bears witness to what I'm trying to say, is that when a common language collapses, this is what happened. I mean, liberal democracy functions when basic assumptions are respected, even if they're not legally binding. The problem is that these basic assumptions are no longer respected.
That's true.
I mean, it's a situation similar to the Weimar Republic, where a large share didn't believe in liberal democracy, and it eventually broke down. And we're seeing a similar phenomenon in Western Europe, where growing minorities are not happy about capitalism, are not happy about democracy, are not happy about Western civilization, and we're seeing the similar dynamics of slowly taking place, both from the left and from the right.
Yeah, I agree.
Let me throw another topic here. So we're discussing how Bob Dylan was appalling towards the IDF, and there is a similar concept that I just heard in an American podcast. So it's IDS. Are you familiar with that, Marco?
No, I'm not familiar with that. No.
Raphael?
No.
Enlighten us.
No worries. I was just told this morning. So IDS stands for Israel Derangement Syndrome. Okay.
Oh, I see. Right.
Yeah.
I think you guys know what I mean. So,
Yes.
and you, Marco, you talk a lot about Palestinism. Do you think
Yes.
these two diseases are linked?
Without a shadow of a doubt. I think Palestinism encapsulates the incapacity to think properly, an incapacity to join the dots, to misrepresent reality, a failure to understand reality. And it is to a great extent self-induced. It's when a moral framework collapses, the human psyche follows. Okay, people generally go off the rails. So I believe it generates something which I call palhysteria. Okay, which is evident, which was evident, by the way, in Nazi Germany. I'm not sure if any of you have seen a series called The World at War. Garry, you probably remember The World at War.
I do. It was very good. Yeah.
It was a wonderful series, and they showed the build up to the Second World War, and they showed German-speaking citizens of Eastern Europe basically who were basically were primed to speak, to talk about things which weren't happening. Okay, that was one important instance. And then there was another instance where a German officer, obviously he subscribed to Nazi ideology, who basically lived in this fantasy world about the Jews. He was saying, I shall never forget what the Jews did to us. Okay, which bore no relation to reality. And this was after the war. Okay, so he was being interviewed after the war. So it is an incapacity to fathom reality, and this generates very serious consequences, because you can't hold a proper conversation with these people.
Yeah, that's right. And I think my opinion is that our educated middle classes have largely become completely unmoored from reality. And if I could just mention another thing that Bob Dylan said, which I find it strange, this has hardly been in the news at all, but he also shouted, I hear you want your country back.
Yeah.
Well, shut the fuck up. You can't have that. So he was also addressing the British people and saying, we own your country. He was black, by the way, and I don't know if he was born in Britain or not, but he's certainly black, and clearly doesn't feel English, because if he felt English, and most people on the left claim that all immigrants, the moment they set foot in Britain, become British, this is clearly not true. He's explicitly saying that I am not English, but English is mine now. So you can all shut up. You are inferior. And now we are going to rule. I mean, to me, this is extremely disturbing. And it's also shocking that the almost entirely white audience applauded this, because that's only possible if they have really a quite fantastic level of self-hatred.
Yeah, that's what I want to say. I think the most dangerous thing is not to happen on the stage; it's the crowd, because the crowd should have booed them as a as a one person. They should have tell him, go away. We don't want you on stage. They should throw things on him, bottles, I don't know, whatever they have. This man shouldn't have finished his show. This is not normal.
Yeah. But Garry, that's a hilarious thing that they don't feel self-hatred. They're actually tremendously proud of belonging to the educated, enlightened intelligentsia that hates everything their grandparents stood for, and are clearly superior to the hoi polloi that likes Nigel Farage, or that sings Rule Britannia, and in these days, after you've gone through the state high school system, university system, got a PhD, if you're not terribly ashamed of being Westerner, you've absolutely done nothing, and your degree is worth nothing. That's the badge of honor of feeling so ashamed of your whole identity. That shows that you're actually superior and enlightened. And this idea that you had to turn patriotism and national pride to make a society more inclusive, paradoxically, actually hinders integration, because who wants to give up being, a proud Arab or a proud Turk or a proud Russian to feel ashamed of being British, French, or German? No one. So integration has actually been hindered by this culture of, collective guilt and self-flagellation.
Yeah, I was actually talking to a friend a few days ago, and he was saying nationalism is accepted if it's all about a country becoming independent. The moment that they want to expand a couple of meters, then they are the enemy of the civilization. And we see that not only with the so-called Palestine, but let's say with Catalonia, with the Basque Country, and a few others. But if they would like to expand, then they are already crossing the lines. That's
not if it's the Ummah, not if it's the Ummah. It's only if the nasty white Christians. If it's the Ummah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Talking of double standards, I have a question for the three of you guys. So I think there are two things these days that will put you in trouble. They are socially unacceptable. Okay. One is supporting Israel in public, and the other one is making a stand for Donald Trump. So if you have to choose which one puts your life in danger more, whether it's supporting Israel or Trump, which one you think is trickier? It's difficult. I know. I
mean, honestly, Vitor, do you know anyone who is pro-Israel but anti-Trump, or vice versa?
Pro-Israel and anti-Trump. Not many, but they exist. And the other way around, they exist.
I think I do.
There are some. We're
not Jewish.
I think it would depend where you are quite a lot, actually. I mean,
but let's say on social media, which is a universal sphere. So if you are, let's say you post, I'm in favor of the Israel intervention in Gaza, or I'm delighted that Trump got into office. Where do you receive more backlash?
In my particular case, I mean, I have a kind of qualified support for Trump. There are many things I don't like about Trump, so I've never given my unqualified support for Trump anyway. But even when I've said anything good about Trump, because I do think he's done some good things, I've been attacked very viciously. But I've certainly said some good things about Israel, and I don't think I've had the same level of hostility. But that might be because most of my friends are American. I think in America the absolutely unforgivable sin in the intelligentsia is to support Trump in any way, even a sort of very
Garry,
qualified way.
If you had defended instead of Israel, Netanyahu would have made a difference. Do you think that Netanyahu and Trump are equally reviled, or one is slightly more kosher than the other?
They're both pretty hated, I mean, I don't know if I should say this. Let me not say exactly who it was. Let's say I was talking to a close member of my family the other day, and she was saying, I can't see why Trump and Netanyahu haven't both been killed. Why doesn't someone kill them both?
Well, people have actually tried in Trump's case.
Yeah. So I think there's a similar level of hatred.
It is hatred, indeed. We had the same phenomenon in Italy with Berlusconi. He generated particular hatred among the left. It was a derangement syndrome.
Garry, I have to plead guilty because I was as nasty as your family relative. Today I told my Iranian dry cleaner that I was very sad that Ali Khamenei was still not in heaven.
Rafa, but we have to come out. We have to come out here. What is the biggest issue? To come out as a Israel supporter or a Trump supporter?
I mean, in Germany, because of history, you can get away with defending Israel, but absolutely not with defending Trump, because the whole German media is, monolithically hostile and has demonized Trump, and in a way that's really quite embarrassing because, if you ask the average educated German, if Trump is a potential Hitler, at least 70% would say yes.
In my experience, I think it's the biggest sin to support Israel, because Trump, at least, he can be entertaining, he can say wild stuff, people can laugh at him, but with Israel there is no humor. People won't forgive any Israeli action. Even, let's say, if Israel changes government to a left-wing coalition, the hate will remain. Maybe not at the same level, but the anti-Semitism is nothing that people can escape from. And I would also say that most people who are anti-Semitic, they don't know that they are anti-Semitic. And most people who are anti-Trump, they are aware of the hate. So it's easier to, let's say, to walk away from it.
But you're talking about the elite, aren't you, Vitor? I mean, I'm on a number of Portuguese groups on social media, and a lot of people are supporting Israel here, actually. I would say perhaps not the majority of the people in the media class, but I think lots of ordinary people are strongly supporting Israel. I don't think there's mass anti-Semitism amongst ordinary Portuguese people, or for that matter, ordinary British people. I see the same thing there, actually, that the ordinary people much more balanced.
Yes, the healthy patriotic among the British and Portuguese would have an affinity with what's happening here in Israel. I suspect Israel is guilty among the elites of being a proud nation with a long tradition, which intends to continue to survive and not dissolve into nothingness.
I mean, we saw it at Eurovision. I mean, when the results came in, Israel was loved in many, many countries, even though the elites gave the impression that, they were unwelcome. They were, I mean, it was so surprising and astonishing that there were even jokes on Israeli social media saying that, the Mossad had hacked the voting system to make an Israeli singer look popular.
But Rafa, I would argue that people vote on Israel because the vote is secret. That's one thing to hide, behind the curtain and support Israel. The other thing is to be out and about saying, I support what Israel is doing because there are social repercussions for that. So it's,
well, that's it. You raise a very important point.
But that's true. I have friends, fellow alumni from Yale, who tell me in private, I agree with most of the things you say, but I cannot afford to like it or support you because I have a career, and I cannot afford to share your horrible views in public.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's very sad. Talking of cancel culture, so it seems that our good friend Bob has now his visa has been revoked, so he won't travel on the States and and enjoy himself from coast to coast. In Manchester, in France, his shows have also been cancelled, and on top of that, his agent just said "hasta la vista." So can we take it as a sign that the progressives are not much in charge as they were? Garry?
Well, I mean, certainly they're not in the States, as we know. I think whatever you think about Trump, and I've had some reservations about his foreign policy and the tariffs, but I mean, he's been ferociously trying to tackle the ideological one-sidedness of the universities and of wokeness in general in the culture, I think. So yes, perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, I really think that there's a structural problem. It's not just an anecdotal issue. And now we're fortunate that Trump is canceling Bob Dylan's visa. But I really think that if Kamala Harris would have won, that wouldn't have happened, and there would have been absolutely no consequences.
That's it's very interesting what you say. You see, because we're getting back to the free speech thing again. Free speech isn't free; it has a price. I think people don't realize that free speech and license are two distinct things. And certainly we see with the American government, they said, yes, you're free to speak and to express yourself and say what you want. But we also invoke the right to reassess our relationship with you. You can't enter our country now.
Yeah.
I mean, in America, you have, constitutionally very solid safeguards to freedom of speech. But in practice, it's very, very limited because anything you write or say can be a grounds for dismissal from your job. And you have no recourse to the justice system like you might have in Germany, where you can go to court and say, look, it's not right to fire me because I said something on my private social media account that has nothing to do with my employer.
Well, the private social media account isn't really that private, though, is it? Because by definition, it is a social exercise. It's out there. I mean, if you say you're a supporter of some vile ideology and you invoke something that's terrible towards a certain group, it's out there, isn't it? Really, though.
It is, but there are limits because one day it advances our rights, and the other day it advances the rights of Sharia courts. So
but they're not equal. What I'm saying is that they're not equal.
Of course, they're not equal.
In a nation state, the Sharia court isn't, or it could be another court, isn't abiding by the law. It doesn't communicate with the host system. This is the problem here. Minorities need to weave their way into the fabric of the society that hosts them, not the other way around. The host society cannot pander to every minority. There has to be what I'm saying is, sorry, and I'll stop. The overarching system has to remain intact.
Yeah, I agree, Marco. But let's get away for a second from this debate, and just defending J.K. Rowling's, is a reason in America for getting you fired if your employer thinks that you're supporting so-called transphobia. So, I also think that there's a big gap in America between de facto and de jure freedom of speech.
Yeah, that's true. Again, that varies quite a bit from state to state. if you're in California or New York, it's going to be really different from being in Arkansas, where I used to live, or Alabama. Though even in the South, which was conservative, if you taught in a university, there were pretty severe de facto restrictions to what you could say, as I found out from
Right.
On the conservative or on the liberal side?
Hmm?
On the conservative or on the liberal side?
On the liberal side. I mean the universities everywhere in the States are dominated by liberals, and even in the very conservative states. I mean, the only exceptions are really a handful of private conservative colleges, Christian. There's a handful of fundamentalist Christian colleges usually, which are not, but almost any public university, for example, is going to be completely dominated by pretty far left politics now, actually. And it changed quite a lot while I was there. I would say it was kind of center left when I got there in the early 2000s, but by about 2015 was becoming quite radical left.
Yeah, the problem is the left. There used to be a normal left. Yeah, but the Labour Party, to a great extent, was inspired by Christian values. Unfortunately, as you know better than I, Garry, you lived in England for a long time, it was infiltrated by Marxist elements and, let's say, post-1968 elements, which basically acted as a worm eating up the intellectual brain of the founding fathers of the Labour Party. Because, years ago, I mean, a conservative and a Labour supporter would agree on basic morality.
Yes.
That's no longer the case.
No.
The reference points is, for example, you have the leader of a Labour Party who can't explain the difference between a man and a woman. Yeah. Okay, he was caught in flagrante there, red-handed. I mean, somebody should have asked him, did you marry a man or a woman? I think that should...
Yeah,
that's the question that's the question to Macron these days, no?
One interesting fact I'd like to point out is that a lot of this anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism comes from the quarters of music, sport, acting, which actually has a very, important Jewish presence. And I was once in Yerevan, Armenia, where I happened to strike a conversation with an African-American cameraman who works in Hollywood. And I noticed he started saying, passive-aggressive things against Jews. So I engaged him in conversation, not revealing my true opinions. And then I told him, don't you think that the reason that there is so much dislike of Jews in the African-American community is that so many of its most successful members work in sectors that, have a heavy Jewish presence. So, you have athletes or singers working with Jewish sports teams owners or Jewish impresarios and so on. And I said, yes, that's exactly it. And then I told them, but don't you think it's unfair to dislike Jews for giving you chances that, WASPs might not have given you in other industries? And he said, well, that's not how it feels.
I'm going to show you the new British national hero for freedom. Are you ready?
Yalla.
So, just give me a second and you'll see her name. So that's the lady, this smiley and cheerful lady. Her name is Helen Wilson, and she was upset because Niqab was not on air with BBC, so she decided to live stream to TikTok in the name of freedom of speech. Interesting. Is it that the freedom of speech territory is switching to the left, or they are just making a case using victimhood, which is something not new to that crowd, Garry?
I'm not sure if I understood the question, Vitor. Could you repeat it?
Yeah, it seems that they are now claiming that they are being censored.
Oh, I
because
see.
Niqab
Yes.
was not on the air, and until now, the whole freedom of speech topic was mostly something claimed by the right. But now they're
yes, I
taking it
see.
back.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yes, there is definitely some of that. I've seen some leftists in recent days actually saying, we're going to go to prison and we're going to be cancelled. And this is absolutely wrong. And of course, the irony here is that it was leftists that started the whole cancel culture, and they were very happy with it while they were cancelling conservative people and getting them put in prison and shutting them down and getting them dismissed from their jobs and so on. So yes, I think there is. I think this whole Bob Villain thing shocked the British public quite a lot. At least, I mean, I'm not in Britain at the moment, but that's my impression from looking at the media. And I think a lot of people on the left are afraid, actually. And you must have noticed that lots of leftist commentators are taking a much more moderate position now. I mean, Ash Sarkar, for example, who describes herself openly as a communist, has now saying that she's not woke at all, and she doesn't mind if people mispronounce her name, and she's not going to worry about microaggressions, and so they're trying to cover themselves.
So she'll be a reform candidate.
Yeah, but a lot
Stranger
of them,
things have happened.
a lot of them also who used to make a big deal about their pronouns, as they're not using pronouns anymore. Like AOC in the States is no longer using pronouns, for example. So I think they're on the defensive, definitely.
I'd like to point out one thing, that the equivalent of what was said at the festival is, someone, a right-wing band shouting something like, death to Sharia courts, death to Sharia courts. And, that is something only, white supremacist neo-Nazi bands would do. So I don't think you can compare the canceling that has been going on towards more conservative views, and that is now just recently being introduced against basically people on the left who advocate and call for murder.
Good point.
And but we've also seen this on the right after Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, got basically lost their primetime shows because they were basically being openly bigoted. They started saying, we're resisting the Zionist control of the media who want to censor patriots and so on. And all these artists who are losing money and venues because of their hatred against Jews are resorting to the same kind of hateful rhetoric of victimhood.
Yeah, let me now focus on Niqab. Now, Niqab, they are openly anti-Israel and anti-British, and they just played in Britain. Is it okay for England to open the doors to Niqab, or they should just tell them, you're not welcome here because you are openly anti us and you are inciting violence to our people, Garry?
Well, I don't know all that much about Niqab, to be honest. I know that they're anti-British and want to unite Ireland, for example, and anti-Semitic too. I'm not, to be honest, I don't know exactly what they've said. So whether they're crossing what I would consider to be acceptable lines or not, I can't really say. But obviously that's relevant to what Marco was saying about, to what extent are you justified in refuse. My personal opinion is that if someone is hostile to your country, I mean, we've had lots of people hostile to the country expressing their opinion, and many British people who are hostile to the country too, expressing. I mean, that doesn't bother me so much, but it's when there's, for me, the line is when there's incitement to violence. I mean, then I think you absolutely have the right to say, no, you're not.
Let me just pick you up on that, Craig, because there is also a case to be made for people who are slowly but surely chipping away at the fabric of society. It doesn't have to be head on. It can be a stealth operation. And I think this is worth considering, because people are more intelligent than we think. When they want to damage a society, they can collapse it from within, slowly but surely. And it's been happening.
And they are, yes.
And so I think liberal democracy, to a certain extent, is short-circuiting, because people are invoking this conception of liberal democracy to gnaw away at its innards. That's why I'm a little bit careful about, we're in a wartime situation or in an emergency, and I believe we're in an emergency situation, and I believe you believe we're in an emergency situation.
Yeah, I do.
Perhaps we need to reassess the way we deal with certain threats.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Raphael.
Yeah. I mean, Garry, I'm very worried after hearing what you said, because if even someone like you is sort of okay with, people coming to Europe or in your own country, and as long as they don't incite violence, basically spitting on the soup, on the food they eat from, that shows. I think that I would say that the problem is not philosophical; it's ethical. I mean, to have people who basically are thankless, showing gratitude openly, to the society that has given them so much, is something we should not accept. And of course, you can justify it on grounds of freedom of speech, of democratic values, but at the end of the day, it's very unethical. And in addition to political rights and freedoms, I think, as Marco pointed out, we need to have an ethical foundation where basic values like respect, like gratitude, like loyalty are, something we demand and expect from everyone.
There has to be some kind of contract.
Yeah.
Some kind of covenant. Covenant is a better word. Some kind of covenant. An immigrant who comes to Britain must enter into a covenant with a society that hosts them. I think this. Sorry if I interrupted.
I just want to say, just on that note, a couple of days ago, I was at a barber, and unfortunately, the TV was on, and they were playing hip hop music, which I'm not that familiar with because it's not really my type. But I had to pay attention to the lyrics, and there was so much disrespect towards women that was unbelievable. The way they were portraying women, it was like they were sex toys. Just to make it simple, I'm not going to quote the lyrics here because they were so disgraceful that I don't think I should echo in this podcast, but they were referring to the women like they were pleasure objects. It was disgusting. Of course, we all know they're all black or or African, so that's fine. And I was thinking to myself, if a white group will do the same, they will be cancelled the day after. But just because they come from Brazil or from Africa, it's so good. And it was not only about the women. They were referring to women as white women. And for me, that was another issue. If they want to do it between themselves, it's already a red flag. And then referring a race, I think it's enough to say, guys, you can play your music in your bedroom, let's say in your house party, but not on TV, because that's an offense towards a gender and a culture. But they get away with it.
I basically agree with what you've all said, but you have to think about how do you enforce that? Like what's the machinery? Because if you're going to I mean, who makes the decisions about what's the acceptable? I mean, I agree, for example, with Raphael, that if someone is spitting on your food, I mean, to me, that's assault. I mean, that puts my health at grave risk. So to me, that's clearly assault, and somebody who spits on my food should certainly be subject to imprisonment, and if he's someone who's not a citizen, deportation. But the problem with speech is that there are grey areas, and who decides, you know, if you don't have more or less absolute free speech, then what you inevitably end up having really is some form of dictatorship, really. And you know, occasionally there are benevolent dictators. They have existed in the past. You know, we had people like Frederick the Great in the 18th century, Catherine the Great, arguably, but most dictators are not benevolent, and even if they are, you know, you're giving them an awful lot of power. That's the trouble. You're trusting someone. I'd much rather see it codified in law in some way.
You know, Gary, I completely agree, and you know, Marco said it correctly that you know, we have a breakdown of the moral epistemology of our society, because you know, 50 years ago you didn't need laws for everyone to know what was acceptable and what was, you know, beyond the line. And now, you know, you have people defending in the name of free speech hateful, pornographic, you know, and insightful rhetoric that, you know, 50 years ago you didn't need any special laws for everyone to agree that, you know, it should be basically so hindered as much as possible.
Yeah.
But the issue that I was trying to raise is the two-tier society. It seems that for some people there is green pass, while others have tape covering their mouth. And that's very problematic. We need to understand why is that? Why some people can do whatever they want and others are very limited? And who is deciding, you know, who needs to be you know, who needs to be monitored and who has this green pass? Why is that? I think it's all down to the fact that we believe that some people were oppressed, and you know, for centuries, and now they just get to do whatever they want because for centuries they were the oppressed. That's the problem. But that's not how you solve the problem.
I mean, I would say, you know, that's how the left frames it, that it's you know, historical reparations. I think it's actually much more of an instance of racism of low expectations. They don't expect from Arabs or from Africans or for anyone who has a darker skin the same ethical, you know, intellectual level. So they think that, you know, anything that these minorities do, you know, has to be accepted, has to be, you know, respected, celebrated, even though they would never do the same when, you know, the protagonists were white and Christian. And I've seen this behavior many times. I had friends who were always, you know, complaining about how racist Germany is and Germans are. So I took these, you know, friends 3 times to an African restaurant, which is very African, you know, in the good and the negative sense. But they were completely disgusted because, you know, they apparently only like Africans with a suit and a tie at a university conference, and not, you know, real Africans. And that showed me very much how much hypocrisy and how much paternalism is behind, you know, the white elites that patronize all these, you know, resentment, all these grievance rhetoric, which actually is not from the average Arab or African. I have no problem speaking with people from the Middle East, from Africa, about the problems of those continents, of those areas. I only have problems when I speak to white university graduates, especially if they have a PhD. After 2 minutes, they say I'm the most hateful person I've ever talked to, you know, in many months.
That's true, yeah. And can I just tell quite a funny story about that? When I was teaching in the UAE once, all of my students were Arab, and to be honest, most of them were not terribly hardworking, especially the boys. I mean, some of the girls were, because that was kind of their ticket for independence. But the boys, who mostly knew that dad was going to get them a job in the oil company or something, they didn't bother working. And I tried to give them homework, and I gave them very small amounts of homework, an hour or two maybe, and they said, "Oh, very hard, teacher, we can't do that," and I said, "Look, when I was a student at Cambridge, I would typically have to read probably 20 books a week, and one of my students said, 'Yes, sir, but you are English. We are only Arabs.'"
Was that a joke?
I guess it was, but that I thought there was still some really endearing modesty there.
Yeah, Ustad.
Let's keep the good humor here, and I'm going to show you a Sacha Cohen clip from the festival.
Throw the Jew down the well, so my country can be free. You must grab him by his horns, then we have a big party. Throw the Jew down the well, so my country can be free. You must grab him by his horns, then we have a big party.
Now, just for clarity, for those who are, not aware, Sacha Cohen doesn't have actors in the traditional sense of thing. He just runs into sports venues, pubs, public squares, and uses real people. Okay, so the people you see there cheering are real people. They could be in your local pub. So that's something to be concerned with, I would say. Garry, this was recorded in the flyover states where you spent a few years. Is it somehow a surprise, or you can see that happening even in today's day?
Well, I mean, they probably know that was satire, I imagine, I mean, Sacha Baron Cohen is quite well known, and I think everybody knows he's Jewish. I mean, I can't really say. I mean, he could tell you whether they were naively supporting throwing Jews in the well, or whether it was really just an absurd joke.
There are precedents for throwing Jews down the well in Blighty, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, no, but this was in the States, apparently.
Yeah, no, I know. It's not in the sense that it's not so far-fetched.
No.
I mean, I just think it's we should also celebrate how open-minded Jews are, that they also sing about getting thrown into ditches. It's wonderful.
Well, one of the best things about Jewish culture for me is the fabulous sense of humor. I mean, so many hilarious Jewish comedians.
I once wrote an article advising Israel to really leverage humor, because I think it's much harder to hate someone who makes you laugh.
Yes, indeed. That's you raise a very good point, and that's what wokeism has done. It's destroyed humor, hasn't it? I mean, it really has. I mean, I just love the old British comedians, from Tommy Cooper to Benny Hill, and they were sending up everything, and it was hilarious, and they laughed, and it was concealed smut a lot of the time, but it was wonderful stuff. You know, it really was.
But there was also a lot of self-mockery. You know,
Absolutely,
one of the big characteristics of British humor is it's a self-deprecating character. Actually, we didn't need other people to laugh at us because we were always laughing at ourselves.
That's right. That's right. And there wasn't all this snobbery about it. There was some hilarious. I mean, even the silliest Carry On films were wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, but to be honest, you know, the works have also contributed to humor because there are so many good jokes about them. You know, just my LinkedIn profile, thanks to gender pronouns, you know, I'm officially a he/she/it. So
the other contribution that we owe the woke crowd is how much they elevate the music. No, I think we should all be grateful for how the wokies have made the musicians so much of a good people, because we all remember how rock stars used to behave. You know, they used to be not the most respectful individuals, you know, towards women and all that. And now it seems that the youth only admire those who are on the establishment side. Now, for me, this is outrageous, because I remember that when I was, I say, 18 or 20, I would be into the people who would confront the society and not necessarily those who are on the side of the good. I think that was part of being young. Like, you would be with the rebellion, and now is the opposite. Do you think it's the reason why music is not as let's say popular as it was when we were young?
No, I don't think that's the main reason at all. I think the main reason is that it's much worse.
Quality.
Yeah, I mean, it's become much worse for lots of reasons, partly because it's all become computerized. So, you know, human beings are not making most of it now, partly because of the streaming services. People can't really make money from records anymore. So it's what's happened is that the big music companies promote a very small number of people that they know they can make very large amounts of money from live shows. And so basically what they have are actors and dancers, not people who are real creators, you know. So even someone like Taylor Swift, who theoretically writes her own songs, in fact, she has a team of 10 or 12 writers. And they're, you know, most of what she sings is not really her own work. I mean, it may have her hand in it, but it's not really. It's all formulaic, you know. So, you know, I think that I know something about this because I used to play in bands, and there's a whole complex set of factors actually. But I mean, it is true that the bands have always been on the left, really, most of them. There've always been occasional exceptions as well. There still are. I mean, you know, Rod Stewart, who headlined at Glastonbury, actually advised people to vote for Nigel Farage. You know, Morrissey is quite conservative, as you know, and they tried to cancel him a few years ago, and they said he'd never play in Manchester again, but he was in Manchester last week or a couple of weeks ago playing in I can't remember the name of it, the big football stadium to, you know, tens of thousands of people. So I don't think that's the reason. You know, I don't think people care enough about the politics to go specifically for the politics. Oasis, again, are very popular and they're not very politically correct.
Yeah. Actually, on that note, Garry, I was hoping that Oasis would not follow the trend, but I just saw yesterday that they announced sponsorship with Bohemians, which is a wokest team in Ireland. So I'm not sure if that's a matter of time. I was very disappointed because I would be with you, because they have been very critical of the Glastonbury Festival, of the Vitor signaling on stage. But the moment I saw that sponsorship, I was like, yeah, they realized that they need to surrender, because if they want to be successful, or if they want to have a smooth path to success, that's the only way. So let's see. Maybe just a sponsorship for money, but let's see.
Garry,
Rafa.
wouldn't you agree that it would suffice to change 100 key people in key positions in the cultural world and in academia and in journalism for the whole atmosphere, to completely change? Not more than 100 people.
Not more than 100.
In key positions that would really do, like, think and behave like we would want them to do.
Yeah, I mean, that would certainly help. I'm not sure if that would be enough, to be honest. Do you think that would be enough?
Because my impression is that a lot of people just go along because that's the way to secure promotions. They're all scratching each other's backs. I mean, a lot of people don't really believe it.
No, they don't all believe in it. I mean, I know this from personal experience. I mean, last year, for example, I had an agent look at my latest book, and she said it was wonderful. She said she loved the characters, the writing was brilliant, it was always very engaging, but she said, I know that I can't sell this to any publisher because it was kind of it's about Gabriele D'Annunzio, the Italian nationalist poet and hero. So it's about a right-wing guy, and it's by a white heterosexual guy as well. So, and what she basically said was, I'm just not going to fight for it, although I think it's very good. What can you do? Yeah.
Is the system itself if being progressive, it's equal to be profitable, then it will remain as is. We just need to target the pockets of the system. How? I don't know exactly, but we need to make them unpopular, because the moment that their wallet is at stake, then they will change, because at the end of the day, it's all about making money. That's all. And again, making money and gaining power.
But the funny thing, I mean, returning to your example, I'm sure the publisher would love it, but they cannot publish it because they know the critics are going to thrash it if it doesn't, celebrate some leftist transsexual hero. So it's all a game of people fearing someone else, even though very few actually might really, be true believers.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I actually think that they are losing money now. I mean, if you look at Hollywood, no one's going to the cinema anymore. Who wants to see a stupid woke Snow White, for example? Which is basically a sort of feminist propaganda. Nobody wants to see that, and that lost money. And publishing, they are losing money now. So, I have a little hope, perhaps things will change.
Yeah. I mean, there was always a leftist slant, but, art came before. Now it's clearly, in your face ideology.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, in the past, there were leftist writers and leftist editors and so on, which is fine. I've got nothing against them having a say too, but there were also very good writers on the other side, across the spectrum. There were not two sides either. There was a spectrum. Now that really only one point of view is allowed, we have this kind of monolithic authoritarian culture, which is not healthy at all. And it's simply boring apart from anything else. You pick up a novel, you know from the title what the whole novel's going to be about. The same with films. If I watch 10 minutes of any Hollywood film, I don't need to watch the rest of the film. I can predict everything that's going to happen.
And it's
For instance, in the past, sorry, Raphael, just want to say
ironically,
something.
it doesn't promote
Okay.
diversity, because, for example, when I see that someone gets a big literature prize and she happens to be a Black Muslim woman, I'm like thinking, did she really earn it, or is she just filling quota check boxes? And it's sad because she might be the best author in the world, but I have good reason to be suspicious.
Yeah.
No, I just want to mention, like in the past, there were fabulous writers who were openly anti-Semitic. I can think of two now: Ezra Pound and Louis Ferdinand Céline. And I still read them. They are there on the bookshelf, and I don't hide them. They are the same shelf as my Hanukkah. That's fine. That's, of course, the books I have there. They don't contain anti-Semitic remarks. They are poetry books or novels, that kind of stuff. But I'm not going to hide them just to look good. I'm a fan of most of Ezra Pound poetry, and I have no issue assuming that in public, because he was anti-Semitic, but he was still very, very talented as a writer. So this does not only apply to the left, but also from the left to the right.
You raise an interesting point about the anti-Semitism. Bear in mind that there is anti-Semitism and there is anti-Semitism. What we're seeing now in Palestinism is the genocidal variant, the worst expression of anti-Semitism. In the past, I mean, if you walk into many cafes in Italy, you can hear offhand remarks about Jews or something like this, or somebody who's referred to as a miser is called a rabbi, for example. These are banal, but it's not the genocidal variant. I think we have to distinguish between shades of anti-Semitism. It's when it becomes genocidal, as we see now, that it becomes really dangerous. People by nature do have prejudices, and it's very difficult after thousands of years to wean them off in one go. But the type of anti-Semitism we see now is the most virulent genocidal form.
Yeah.
I believe this is an important distinction, which needs to be made.
And it's virulent because it gives the believer the impression that he's doing the opposite of being genocidal. He's being humanitarian. He's defending democracy and equality. I mean, when he shouts, death to the IDF, I don't really think he was imagining, what the consequences of eliminating the IDF would be, because we all know what that would be, and I don't think he would
I'm not sure. I think that there are people now who have been worked up into such a frenzy that what happened 80 years ago could very easily happen again.
Yes.
The handbrake's off with some people. The handbrake is distinctly off.
I mean, the sad thing is, I had this, hunch when I first read the autobiography of Rudolf Höss, the Nazi commander at Auschwitz. That what impressed me, is that he did the most awful things, and he was sincerely convinced that what he was doing was good. And another historian recently wrote a book precisely, proving this thesis, that the worst criminals, mass murderers, talk themselves into believing that what they're doing, what they're saying is good. And this is just the case with all these idiots who are supporting Hamas. I really think that they believe or want to believe that they're righteous, and that's awful.
Very much so, very much so. In fact, the religion, there's sort of a perverted notion of human rights, which is pushing in this direction.
Yeah.
Final question here I have is for Garry. I have a bonus question here. So you mentioned that you are struggling to publishing your book, but there are people who are thriving in their career. One of them is actually British, and I'm going to put her on the screen. It's Bonnie Blue. So her new venture is to welcome the refugees, that they will feel happy on arrival. So as you can read here, she is feeling sorry for those folks who are on the boat trying to improve their lives. So I would like to get your thoughts on this. You think she's making a favor to the to the British people with this?
Well, I'm sure they'll be very happy to accept the offer. I imagine many of them. I mean, that's just a publicity stunt, isn't it? I mean, I don't suppose that she cares about.
So from Virginia Woolf to Bonnie Blue, that's what a transition.
I don't know, guys, if you saw her interview with Andrew Tate, but that was hilarious because both of them are just talking off their ass. Let's say it like that, and it's just hilarious. Like there's not much to learn, but if you are on the mood just to eat popcorn and have a good time, and
okay, please share the link. Please share the link of the talk so we can watch it.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe next time we can have Bonnie Blue or Andrew Tate in this podcast.
Maybe she can make the same offer to us,
Folks,
I would refuse.
She has no problem. She has like 1,000 lads lining up for her, so she'll be fine. Yeah.
Let's change subject.
Yeah. Now let's finish. Let's finish this conversation. I want to thank you guys for the insights. As usual, you provide a lot of value. I think we entertained the viewers in a way I was not expecting. So that was great. And the door is open. So I hope to see you in one of the upcoming episodes. Marco, we see each other next Wednesday. Yeah, next Wednesday. Maybe we can do something else in the meantime. So I want to thank the viewers as well for staying around for 90 minutes. If you enjoy what we provide you with, please press those 3 buttons below, subscribe, like, and share. That's the best way to promote this content, because unfortunately there's no Bonnie Blue among us, so we need to use other techniques here. So yeah, that's what we are here for. So guys, you have a good evening, and stay in touch. Take care.
Bye-bye.